I said, you need to get the fucking back together again soon because we all miss you. Same thing someone said to me.
Steven Tyler didn't just sing rock anthems that defined a generation. He lived them out with a volcanic fury that scorched everything in his path. As the chaotic engine behind Aerosmith, Tyler built a career on unpredictability, theatrical, brilliance, and raw charisma. But beneath that legendary scream was a man who wielded his words like shrapnel. His onstage power was matched only by his offstage fire, igniting controversies that rippled through the industry and left even the most seasoned rock icons singed by his brutally honest tongue. Tyler's unapologetic nature wasn't just a personality quirk. It was a destructive force that forged rivalries, ended friendships, and fractured alliances across the music world. While millions screamed for him in packed arenas, fellow musicians braced themselves, knowing any backstage encounter or media soundbite could become a war zone. He wasn't afraid to call out hypocrisy, mock laziness, or ridicule anyone who didn't meet his personal standard of rock and roll authenticity, no matter how big their name. But this wasn't just petty gossip or industry drama. Tyler's outbursts often came at the cost of respect, trust, and opportunity. While his fans were headbanging to Dream On or Sweet Emotion, Tyler was headbutting egos, challenging personas, and ruthlessly dismantling the reputations of his peers. Sometimes with a smirk, sometimes with rage. The deeper you dig into his history, the clearer it becomes that Steven Tyler wasn't just the mouthpiece of Aerosmith. He was rock music's most volatile truth-teller, a man whose passion for the art form was matched only by his disdain for anything fake, lazy, or undeservedly celebrated. His wrath wasn't random. It was calculated, passionate, and aimed with sniper-like precision at some of rock's most beloved figures. From explosive run-ins with grunge revolutionaries to cold-blooded rivalries with fellow legends, Tyler's battles weren't just tabloid fodder. They were cultural earthquakes that shifted the dynamics of music history. These weren't passive-aggressive jabs or headline-chasing antics. These were full-on assaults against icons he deemed unworthy, and the fallout was often brutal. But that raises the ultimate question. Was Steven Tyler a misunderstood guardian of rock's purity or just a relentless firestarter incapable of coexistence? Today, we uncover the truth behind his 6 most infamous feuds, each one more shocking than the last, and reveal how this one man's relentless honesty changed the trajectory of rock forever. When 2 of rock's most ferocious frontmen collide, the explosion is inevitable. And when Steven Tyler and Axl Rose crossed paths, the result was a feud drenched in ego, fury, and public humiliation that carved a permanent scar into the rock world. The late 1980s saw both Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses dominating the charts. But behind the scenes, a bitter rivalry was fermenting as journalists, critics, and fans pitted Steven Tyler and Axl Rose against each other in a battle for the throne of rock's ultimate showman. Tyler, the seasoned icon with decades of experience, saw in Rose a reckless upstart whose chaotic backstage behavior threatened the professionalism that rock legends had fought hard to legitimize. Meanwhile, Axl viewed Tyler as a relic, an over-the-hill diva clinging to relevance by criticizing the next generation. According to former tour managers, tensions reached boiling point during shared festival appearances where Tyler allegedly fumed at Axl's late arrivals and diva-like demands, claiming they stained the reputation of every band on the lineup. The resentment turned personal in 1991 at the MTV Video Music Awards, where eyewitnesses reported a fiery backstage exchange. Tyler, never one to whisper, reportedly confronted Axl over his lack of discipline and respect for fans, while Axl allegedly lashed back, branding Tyler a washed-up has-been desperate for attention. That moment ignited a wildfire of media speculation, and Tyler didn't hold back in later interviews. He openly criticized Axl's attitude, predicting that Guns N' Roses would collapse under the weight of Rose's narcissism and self-sabotage. Industry insiders recalled how Tyler told radio hosts that Axl lacked the stamina and team mentality needed to survive rock's brutal terrain long-term. The prediction wasn't far off. Guns N' Roses would soon fracture under internal chaos and delayed projects. As the feud dragged on, the two artists refused to appear together at charity concerts, tribute shows, or industry events, forcing organizers to choose sides. While fans of both camps debated furiously, promoters and executives quietly bristled at the logistical nightmare their beef created. Even decades later, neither artist has offered any sign of reconciliation. Their mutual disdain became a defining symbol of how ego clashes can devastate collaboration opportunities and stunt artistic unity in a genre built on rebellion and individualism. Unlike fleeting celebrity squabbles, this was a philosophical war over what it meant to lead a band, represent a generation, and carry the mantle of rock authenticity. For Tyler, Axl was the embodiment of chaos without conscience. For Axl, Tyler was the ghost of a bloated past afraid of being eclipsed. And as time marched on, their feud remained frozen in place, a brutal monument to the power and peril of pride in the music world. The conflict between Steven Tyler and Kurt Cobain wasn't just a war of personalities. It was a seismic philosophical rift that captured the generational transformation of rock itself. At the heart of the feud was Tyler's deep resentment toward what he saw as grunge's rejection of showmanship, positivity, and musical discipline, values he'd spent decades building his career upon. When Nirvana exploded onto the scene in the early 1990s, bringing with it a tidal wave of angsty minimalism and anti-establishment energy, Tyler was one of the first veteran rockers to speak out. He reportedly called the movement depressing and nihilistic, saying it drained the life out of rock and left only the shell of rebellion without the joy. And at the center of it all was Kurt Cobain, the reluctant poster child of grunge. Tyler didn't just dislike Cobain's sound, he despised what he believed the man stood for. According to former MTV executives, during rehearsals for the 1992 Video Music Awards, Tyler cornered Cobain backstage and confronted him about his sloppy stage presence and what Tyler saw as a dangerous glorification of despair. Witnesses claimed Tyler told Cobain that real rock stars elevate their audience, not drag them into misery, and accused him of turning music into a pity party. Cobain, never one to shrink from confrontation, allegedly fired back with scathing words, calling Tyler a corporate puppet who had sold out the raw essence of rock for record deals and commercial airplay. The exchange was brief but intense, and the fallout echoed across the industry. In later interviews, Tyler would continue to trash grunge, calling it a fad and predicting its death as soon as teens got tired of being miserable. But when Cobain died under tragic circumstances, Tyler's previous attacks came under new scrutiny. Critics questioned whether his public disdain had contributed to an atmosphere of hostility that further isolated Cobain, while fans of Nirvana lashed out at Tyler for speaking ill of someone they viewed as a generational voice. Tyler stood firm, insisting he mourned Cobain's death but never believed in his artistic message. To Tyler, grunge wasn't evolution. It was regression, a step backward that rejected everything he believed rock should be: loud, passionate, inspiring, and larger than life. The feud was less about two men and more about two musical worlds, colliding, one of excess and theatricality, the other of raw vulnerability and stripped-down rebellion. Their clash symbolized a broader cultural war between optimism and disillusionment, between the fireworks of classic rock and the smoldering introspection of a darker age. And in the center stood Tyler and Cobain, two icons from different planets, speaking incompatible languages, destined never to see eye to eye. Unlike the fiery explosions that marked many of Steven Tyler's feuds, his long-standing rivalry with Rolling Stones frontman Mick Jagger simmered beneath the surface like a cold war between titans. A silent battle for legacy fought through interviews, tour bookings, and veiled public comments. Tyler hated being called the American Mick Jagger, a label critics used often due to their shared, flamboyant stage presence, energetic struts, and sexually charged performances. While some artists might have considered such comparisons flattering, Tyler viewed them as diminishing, suggesting he was nothing more than a knockoff rather than an innovator in his own right. Former concert promoters recall how Tyler would bristle at being described as Jagger's counterpart, telling them Aerosmith deserved recognition as its own force of nature, not a second-rate British imitation. This resentment deepened in the 1970s and 1980s, when both Aerosmith and the Stones frequently competed for the same major venues and tour dates. Behind the scenes, Tyler reportedly lobbied booking agents to prioritize Aerosmith, arguing that the Stones were past their prime and riding on reputation alone. The passive-aggressive tension turned personal when Jagger, in a British TV interview, implied that American rock bands lacked the depth and cultural sophistication of their British peers, a jab Tyler perceived as a direct insult to Aerosmith's legitimacy. In response, Tyler fired back through American rock magazines, accusing British critics of idolizing their own at the expense of genuinely groundbreaking U.S. acts. Former record execs confirmed that Tyler was especially irritated by the critical bias that seemed to favor the Stones, despite what he believed were weaker songs and recycled concepts. Tyler saw this favoritism as unfair and political, and he made it known, telling reporters that Aerosmith had to work twice as hard for half the respect. The Cold War continued for decades, with neither band ever collaborating or sharing a stage. Their interactions were rare, tense, and professional at best. Unlike other rivalries fueled by drama, this one was driven by ambition, pride, and a deep hunger for recognition. To the public, the silence between Jagger and Tyler was just that, silence. But beneath that still surface lay years of bruised egos, unmet expectations, and a mutual refusal to give ground. It was a rivalry that never boiled over, but also never cooled. A quiet war of stature between two legends who refused to share the spotlight. When hair metal surged to the forefront of MTV-driven fame in the late 1980s, one young voice stood out: Sebastian Bach, the energetic, high-pitched frontman of Skid Row, who seemed to command every stage with electrifying swagger. But while teenage fans cheered, Steven Tyler seethed. To him, Bach wasn't a rising star. He was a carbon copy, a mimic riding on Tyler's legacy without putting in the work or paying the dues. Former MTV programmers recall Tyler's frustration as Skid Row's music videos began dominating the same rotation where Aerosmith had long reigned. Behind closed doors, Tyler dismissed Bach as a theatrical imitator who had stolen his vocal style, stage movements, and even mic-swinging techniques. When both bands found themselves on the 1989 Monsters of Rock tour, the tension exploded backstage. Crew members and insiders remember multiple heated exchanges, with Tyler accusing Bach of stealing not only his sound, but his soul. To Tyler, Skid Row represented everything he feared about the music industry: an emphasis on image over substance, marketing over mastery. In interviews, he didn't hold back, describing the hair metal scene as plastic rebellion and calling out Bach as its most blatant example. Tyler's bitterness deepened when music magazines began comparing Bach's vocals to his own, a comparison Tyler saw not as flattery, but as an insult. Allegedly, Tyler even contacted radio stations to discourage them from playing Aerosmith and Skid Row back-to-back, fearing that listeners would associate the two as equals. Industry insiders reveal that Tyler was especially irritated by Bach's youth and ability to command the teenage demographic that once flocked to Aerosmith. It felt to Tyler like someone had taken his identity, diluted it, and sold it to a younger audience as something fresh. Despite Bach's admiration for Tyler, the older rocker never returned the respect. He saw Bach not as a threat, but as an undeserving borrower of prestige. someone who hadn't fought through the mud and blood of Rock's early days. This feud wasn't about personal insults. It was about ownership, legacy, and what Tyler saw as a betrayal of authenticity. And in his eyes, Sebastian Bach was the shiny-haired symbol of everything Rock had become: shallow, marketable, and infuriatingly effective. Among the wild men of 1980s rock, few matched Steven Tyler's legendary antics, except perhaps Mötley Crüe's frontman Vince Neil, whose reputation for debauchery rivaled and often overshadowed Tyler's. And that was precisely the problem. As Mötley Crüe rocketed to fame with tales of trashed hotel rooms, naked pool parties, and brushes with the law, media coverage began crowning Neil as the ultimate rock bad boy, a title Tyler believed he had earned long before Neil picked up a microphone. According to former security personnel, the friction was palpable whenever the two bands crossed paths at festivals or industry events. Tyler reportedly accused Neil of staging his wild behavior for publicity, arguing that real rock stars didn't need to fake chaos, they lived it. But the turning point came when Tyler got sober in the late 80s, embracing a new chapter of maturity and responsibility. In contrast, Neil doubled down on his reckless image, and Tyler saw this as childish, even dangerous. The feud intensified when Neil's drunk driving conviction led to the tragic death of Hanoi Rock's drummer Razzle. Tyler, who had seen the abyss and climbed back, didn't mince words. He called out Neil's behavior as a disgrace to rock and a setback for all musicians trying to reform their image in the public eye. According to label insiders, Tyler even pressured radio stations to avoid playing Mötley Crüe songs during Aerosmith promo cycles, arguing that being linked to Neil's scandals could hurt Aerosmith's hard-earned credibility. This wasn't a matter of jealousy, it was ideological. Tyler believed rock stars had a responsibility to evolve, and to him, Neil was frozen in adolescent self-destruction. Their feud never fully erupted into violence, but it remained one of rock's most vicious cold shoulders. While the fans loved the drama, those within the industry knew the truth. Tyler saw Neil as an embarrassment, a clown in leather pants whose recklessness threatened to drag the entire genre back into the gutter. And for a man who fought tooth and nail for redemption, that was unforgivable. In the annals of rock history, few relationships have burned as brightly or as destructively as the volatile bond between Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, a partnership forged in genius, shattered by ego, and mended again and again in a cycle of brilliance and betrayal. While the previous feuds in Tyler's life were fueled by industry politics or generational divides, his battle with Perry was something far more personal, intimate, and excruciating. As the dynamic duo behind Aerosmith's most iconic anthems, their creative chemistry was undeniable, but so too was the ever-present tension between them. From the very beginning, Tyler and Perry clashed over everything: songwriting credits, set lists, solos, even the direction of the band's sound. According to former band managers, the two men fought so frequently and so fiercely that sessions would routinely devolve into screaming matches, with doors slammed and egos bruised. And it wasn't just verbal. Engineers and crew members recount studio sessions where tempers flared to the point of violence, all while millions awaited their next masterpiece. In the late 1970s, their simmering rivalry boiled over during Aerosmith's drug-fueled descent into chaos. With both men battling addictions, trust collapsed, and paranoia reigned. Tyler accused Perry of sabotage, of intentionally undermining recording efforts and sabotaging live performances with sloppy playing and erratic behavior. Perry, in turn, claimed Tyler was a control freak who refused to share the spotlight or creative control. The breaking point came in 1979, when Perry abruptly quit the band mid-tour, launching the Joe Perry Project and leaving Tyler reeling. To Tyler, this wasn't just professional abandonment. It was a personal betrayal that cut deeper than any outside feud ever could. For years, The two traded barbs through the press, with Tyler calling Perry disloyal and petty, while Perry accused Tyler of manipulating the band into a dictatorship. Even their 1984 reunion didn't end the war. It merely buried the hatchet deep beneath the surface, ready to be pulled out at a moment's notice. Over the decades, they would clash again and again, over solo projects, reunion tours, management decisions, even Tyler's stint on American Idol, which Perry publicly ridiculed. Their relationship was a constant tightrope walk, and insiders often wondered how Aerosmith survived it all. But despite all the pain, something kept pulling them back together: the music. Their rivalry was the crucible in which their greatest work was forged, a creative firestorm that could destroy or resurrect at will. To this day, Tyler and Perry remain the embodiment of rock's most complicated truth: that sometimes the people who hurt us most are also the ones who complete us. Their love-hate dynamic became a mythic tale of artistry and agony, of two men forever bound by riffs and rage, and of a band that could only exist through chaos. It's the kind of story that legends are made of, and one that proves that not all enemies come from outside the camp. Sometimes they share the stage with you. When the dust settles and the echoes of screaming fans fade into silence, what remains of Steven Tyler is not just the legacy of a rock god, but the scorched earth trail of rivalries that redefined what it meant to be both brilliant and brutal in the music industry. His confrontations weren't accidents. They were declarations, moments where he decided that truth, no matter how damaging, mattered more than diplomacy. But after witnessing the 6 musical wars he waged, from the ego-shattering feud with Axl Rose to the philosophical war with Kurt Cobain, the cold and calculated rivalry with Mick Jagger, the bitter mimicry battle with Sebastian Bach, the ideological clash with Vince Neil, and the emotional minefield that was his relationship with Joe Perry, the question that still haunts the story is whether Tyler was defending the soul of rock, or simply blowing it to pieces with every unfiltered word. There's no denying that Tyler believed in authenticity with a religious fervor. To him, rock wasn't just a genre. It was a battlefield for truth, pain, power, and joy. And anyone who treated it like a gimmick or a shortcut was an enemy to the art form. That belief turned him into both a legend and a pariah, depending on whom you asked. Fans admired him for standing up against what he saw as pretenders, liars, or reckless fame chasers. Critics, however, accused him of letting pride and envy dictate his public behavior, leaving behind a wake of unnecessary hostility and fractured relationships. What makes Tyler's story so compelling is the tension between his love for the music and his inability to coexist peacefully with many of its biggest players. He wasn't afraid to torch bridges, not because he didn't value connection, but because he believed some bridges were built on lies. And yet, with every feud, there was a piece of himself revealed: a wounded idealist, a perfectionist obsessed with preserving rock's purity, and a deeply insecure man who feared irrelevance more than failure. Tyler's mouth was his weapon, his shield, and his undoing. It carved out his identity but also cost him friendships, respect, and chances at legendary collaborations that could have rewritten history. Some say he was just being honest. Others say he was toxic. But maybe the truth lives somewhere in the chaos between those two ideas. Maybe Steven Tyler was exactly what rock needed: a disruptive force who refused to play nice, who reminded everyone that greatness and destruction often go hand in hand. Or maybe he was a cautionary tale, proving that even the most talented voices can alienate the very people who could elevate them. In the end, his legacy isn't just measured in platinum records or sold-out tours, but in the raw, complicated trail of emotion he left behind. So now it's your turn to decide. Was Steven Tyler a guardian of authenticity or just an unstoppable wrecking ball in leather pants? Drop your thoughts below. And if you're as obsessed with the wild truths behind rock's most legendary feuds, don't forget to subscribe. Because the drama never stops, and neither do we.